Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Wages of Fear. The Wages of Fear is a French action thriller serving as a remake of the 1950s film of the same name, and tells the story of Fred, a man who lives a mundane existence in the Middle East performing mercenary work. He's hours away from being able to leave his work behind and move back to Paris with a healthy retirement fund when he's given an offer he can't refuse. In order to prevent an explosion from an oil well engulfed in flames, Fred is forced to team up with a group of mercenaries to transport 2 trucks loaded with dangerous nitroglycerin. Time counts down as the group races across the desert to extinguish the fire before it's too late. Having seen the original 1953 classic directed by Henry-Georges Clouzot, as well as William Friedkin's 1977 adaptation of the novel it's based on, I was skeptical to see how well a modern version of the same story could be pulled off, and unfortunately my fears were confirmed because this movie is pretty bad. Now, it definitely could have been a lot worse, but there's almost nothing about this remake that feels inspired in any way, both as a remake and as a film in general. It's so far removed from what the original set out to accomplish, and while it does try a little bit to capitalize on its premise, it just fails to capture the same sense of tension. The first problem with this movie is the characters. This random bald guy named Fred is probably the most boring, paper-thin protagonist I've seen in an action movie. He's so bland and uninteresting, even the movie is bored of him, as it doesn't even mention his name until half an hour into the story. He's the same grizzled veteran stereotype that was outdated since at least the 1990s. He even has a scene that gives him a 2 days from retirement type of setup. That's how blatant it is. He does look the part, but in terms of characterization, there's almost nothing to go on. The only character element that makes him stand out is his relationship with his brother. I appreciate the film made at least some effort to make him stand out more, but it just doesn't work. The dynamics between him and his brother are rushed, have little to no consequence on the story at hand, and if anything, it feels like an excuse to force emotional reactions from the audience during key moments. The other supporting characters in this movie are even more forgettable. I couldn't tell you any of their names, and honestly, I don't even remember the movie mentioning their names outside of the end credits, which I think would be embarrassing for the director to not even have the courtesy of giving his actors a name for their characters. But moving away from that, the characters in general are so dull. Fred's brother is just Fred but with hair, there's an overconfident merc who exists just to shoot guns and wisecracks, and there's a woman who may as well be a living, breathing cardboard cutout. These characters lack any memorability and chemistry with the lead, which is a shame because the dynamics were much different and better in the original 1953 version. The group before in that movie all had unique personalities, which made the interactions and internal conflict between them that much more interesting. In this movie though, everyone feels like the same character in different clothes, which is made more odd by the fact that it's not even the same situation. Instead of having just 4 characters, there's like 8 of them, but only 4 of them have any real impact on the story, so it's like, why not just stick with 4? This leads to another problem the movie has. Outside of the core premise of transporting nitroglycerin from point A to point B, there is almost nothing in this movie that resembles Clouzot's original version. For a movie that's supposed to be a remake, it's shocking to see how much was changed, and not for the better. Not only are the characters completely different, but the setting is too, and I'm still not sure why. Instead of Mexico, it takes place in an unnamed Middle Eastern country with some sort of conflict going on, and it's like, okay, it's different, but why is it different? I'm not opposed to remakes changing a few things here and there to keep the story fresh, but the movie doesn't expand on these changes to any meaningful degree. There's no sort of hidden message or subtext to glean from what this version shows with its setting, characters, or anything else. So really, the only reason these changes were made is just because. This is what I don't understand about this movie being a remake. If you want to do a movie with a similar idea, why not just give it a different name? Why does it have to have the Wages of Fear attached to it? It is so far gone from what the original Wages of Fear represents. Hell, it's not even really the same genre. Instead of being a thriller about a small group of different personalities clashing with each other with the nitroglycerin in the background, this version is little more than a typical action flick, complete with gunfights, brawl sequences, explosions, and other kinds of bloody mayhem. After a while of watching this, I just found myself wondering, did the director even watch the original movie? I mean, the action scenes are okay by themselves, the CGI is pretty bad in parts, but the action itself is somewhat entertaining. It's just the writing leaves it falling flat, as it's packed with so much plot armor and cliches that it all ends up feeling stale. And on top of that, it's simply not what The Wages of Fear is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about how the characters have to set aside their differences and think creatively to overcome the obstacles they face on their harrowing journey. This movie does away with that creativity and just relies on guns to hold the audience's attention. And it's boring. The movie does occasionally try to be a thriller, and at times it almost works. There's a few tense scenes where characters don't speak, which allows scenes to breathe, and the ambient soundtrack is great at setting the mood. But there's only so much these little things can do with the overt focus on action. The story takes a long time to build, but it doesn't have the same slow burn tension that the original did. It takes almost 40 minutes for the group to even get going with their journey, and when they do, there's not much for them to deal with other than an occasional gunfight or two. And again, all the changes it makes just hurts the movie in the long run. The team is too well prepared, which contrasts the hopelessness of the four vagabonds from Clouseau's version, the villains are unnecessary, and everything about it feels generic in execution. It's as dumbed down as a remake can get. It really feels like this movie doesn't respect the audience's intelligence. Remember when I said before that the original version had nitroglycerin in the background? Well, this movie does the complete opposite, as it likes to show the nitroglycerin in the trucks and the oil well fire for what feels like once every minute. And it's like, okay guys, I get it. You don't have to keep showing this over and over and over again. Looking back on it now, the only positive thing I can say about this movie is how well the cinematography is filmed. It uses a lot of creative angles, including plenty of bird's eye view shots, to show the scale of the journey that the characters undertake. But because 90% of this movie is set in the desert, even that starts to get old after a while. Watching this movie was a mind-boggling experience. Somehow they took the golden premise of driving two trucks filled with volatile nitroglycerin across perilous terrain and still managed to make it boring. If it were any other movie, it'd be easier to just brush it off and forget about it, but unfortunately it claims the prestige of being a remake of one of the greatest thrillers of all time. I'm all for watching brainless action movies if that's the goal from the outset, but it's obvious from all the changes it makes that the movie is trying to be something more, which ironically leaves it feeling lesser. It doesn't work as a thriller, and it will never compare to the original, so in the end, there's no real reason to watch or recommend it. Overall, the Wages of Fear remake is a complete and total bore, and fails to capture even a sliver of what made Clouseau's masterpiece so special. If you love the original Wages of Fear like I do, just stick with that version. Hell, even Freakin' Sorcerer is excellent by comparison. Whatever version you prefer, just make sure it's not this one, because it doesn't even deserve to be mentioned in the same breath as those movies. Normally, I just shrug off a mediocre action flick like this and move on, but I can't ignore how blatantly it tries to capitalize on itself as a remake of an iconic film and how poor of a job it does at being that. If creating the dullest and most unnecessary remake in cinematic history was the objective, then the filmmakers sure have a good contender with this one. What did you think about this movie? Did you hate it as much as I did, or did you find some redeeming factors to it? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of The Wages of Fear. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the British-American sports drama, The Beautiful Game. Bye bye!